All right, good morning, everyone. Today is November 18th, 2021. We are in Gaffney for hearing regarding the Post Commission on behalf of the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance. Specifically, this is Commerce and Insurance versus Patrick Green. The docket number is 12.40-2141531A. I am Administrative Judge Claudia Padfield, assigned by the Tennessee Secretary of State to hear this matter sitting with the commission, with the Post Commission, on behalf of the Commissioner for the Department of Commerce and Insurance. At this point, I'm going to ask Ms. Cooper to identify herself for the record.
My name is Kim Cooper. I'm Assistant General Counsel for Commerce and Insurance.
And please respond. Identify yourself for the record.
My name is Patrick Green.
Chairman Chad Wood. Mark Bundle.
Right there.
Mr. Brian Wright.
Commissioner Ed Jackson.
William Ford. Bob Wagner.
So do we have a form for the commission?
We have a form.
I would like to remind everyone that I am sitting here with the commission to make all rulings regarding order of proceedings, admissibility of evidence, and questions of law, under the authority granted to me by the Tennessee Administrative Procedures Act. However, I will not participate in determining the findings of fact, the conclusions of law, or the only decision of this commission. Those decisions will be made by the commission members only. Members of the commission, during the time of this hearing, it is conducted, no discussion of this case will take place between the commission members, witnesses, attorneys, or any other persons unless the parties are present. The commission sits like a jury and must only consider evidence introduced at the hearing and issue its decision. The Tennessee Sunshine Law requires all commission discussions and deliberations to be in public before all parties. Failure to observe the Sunshine Law may result in the commission's action being reversed or remanded if this is appealed. You really can get iPads in just a little bit on which documents potentially being introduced into evidence by the department will be considered. Aside from that communication, the electronic device, you are not to use any other electronic device or media to communicate any information to anyone, to receive any information from anyone, or to conduct any research about this case or anything related to it. Before going further, I will remind the members of the commission that the law requires to disclose on the record any knowledge of this case or any communications, written, verbal, or otherwise, from any of the parties concerning this case. Do any commission members have any prior knowledge or any possible conflict of interest in this case? Hearing none. At this point, Ms. Cooper, would you like to distribute, or maybe not Ms. Cooper, but would you like to again, you not to look at these until they push it on the head. We have moved to a paperless file, and we will consider having the time office from Ms. Cooper and Ms. Cooper. This one I'm going to go to the technical record. I have the notice of hearing and charges filed by the department on October 4th, 2021. I issued a scheduling letter on October 12th, 2021. Mr. Green filed a motion to dismiss on October 18th, 2021. For that, I set up a recruitment conference. We set it up through email. I did not issue an order regarding that. The response from the department of the motion was filed on October 26th, 2021. I issued an order denying the motion to dismiss on October 28th, 2021. The department filed a list of witnesses and exhibits on November 4th, 2021. On November 12th, 2021, the Department filed hearing and incident. And on November 16th, 2021, was the being filed one. Mr. Cooper, aside from those documents, are you aware of any other documents that should be received in this case? Okay. Mr. Green, aside from those documents, are you aware of any other documents that I should receive?
No, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Green, this hearing is going to proceed as follows. You are the respondent, the Department of Commerce and the petitioner, therefore they have the burden of proof. They must prove by a preponderance of evidence why your post-commission and licensee should be either suspended or revoked. You have the right to be present on anyone who testifies on behalf of the department. You have the right to question and to this for the department. When it's that point in the hearing, I will give you clear instructions on how to do that. At the end of the state's proof, if you are not called as a witness on behalf of the state, you do not have to testify if you don't want to. The burden is not on you. However, you absolutely have the right to disclaim your own behalf. You have the right to submit documents and evidence, as you've already done, to have you considered by the commission. You also have the right to call witnesses on your behalf. Of course, should you choose to testify and say not testify to you, Ms. Cooper has the right to come forward. Then the state, you will also each have an opportunity to provide opposing arguments. The argument will be why you feel as an effort to persuade the commission how you should rule in your favor. They will then have their deliberations, which will be on the record. You cannot participate in those deliberations, not the speaker, but you have a present discussion in the deliberations. They will make their announcements so on the record as to what they feel to be under your commission decision. That you have to leave it as is, so that's also an opportunity. There will be a written decision to be written. Yes. So each side has the opportunity to final or to submit to the commission proposed findings of facts and conclusions of law to help with their deliberations. You can bring one, I prefer this group as well, but the regular argument is not more. Are there any other preliminary matters, Mr. Cooper?
Yes, ma'am. Prior to the hearing and discussions with Mr. Green, we agreed with some stipulations regarding dates and certification. That's all I'd like to do at this point. Mr. Green was employed with the Knoxville Police Department from February 2nd, 2017 until his resignation September 16th, 2020. He went through the Knoxville Police Department Academy and was post-certified on August 18th of 2017. Regarding notice for this hearing, he was emailed the notice on October 4th and received it on October 4th. We also received a copy via certified mail on October 15th. Mr. Green has asked for some stipulations regarding his military service and the dates thereof, and so I would ask him at this point to stand up and announce those dates.
I have a copy of my orders for when I reported Fort Leonard, Missouri, dating 13th October 2020 at 0600 hours. At that point, I was on post and unable to communicate anymore.
Yes, ma'am. Regarding the stipulations that the state just made, that would take care of a couple of the exhibits, and so I would ask that those be moved into evidence at this point. And the iPads, as I said, they're preloaded and they should have the same label that I'm reading off right now, so that you're not having to click through other exhibits. But we have the Green Basic Cert.
Commissioner, if you would, if you want to follow along with the because I don't have exactly what you're presenting to the commission. I want to make sure that
Can you see what she's saying?
been uploaded into my record. So
I've got it here on the screen on the wall. The Green Basic Cert.
you have copies for the court forms?
Yes, ma'am. And I'm shuffling those out right now. And for you as well.
Sunshine.
Yes, ma'am.
I should still have one.
The first document that was uploaded is that document, the Coleman Hall plan.
Yes, ma'am.
There you go. There you go.
Patrick Michael Green, post certification. The email confirming receipt. Which again with the email saying, yes, I received the order. The cert mail receipt. I've already provided Mr. Green with these copies, and I'll. Will be court order.
The board of institutions will be.
Yes, ma'am. So the basic, the post certification, the green card, certified mail receipt, and the email confirming receipt.
So we not still police. Having the certification dated August 18th, 2017. Commission registration also dated August 18th, 2017. The next one is regarding the car license for green. Well, it says COVID-19, so that would be certain. And then the email communications. Between Mr. Green and Ms. Cooper, the people after
At this time, I'd also ask that the notice of hearing and charges that was filed on October 4th become an exhibit.
Is that also uploaded for?
Yes, ma'am. And I've already provided Mr. Green a copy, both prior to today and today.
Notice of hearing and charges filed. So it's 4. Regarding the potential to the funds to do, we now be, every time they see the damage evidence is done, is that all uploaded or no?
It is not uploaded, that you cannot receive it. Then find to do that.
Okay. So Mr. Green, you have a copy of that, hard copy?
I have a digital copy, Your Honor.
You know, whether you shouldn't back.
I don't know.
She says yes. If I have that, if I email that to someone?
If you can email it to me, then I can put it into iCloud and they'll be able to see it.
You acknowledge that you received it, because it's not enough time to upload it.
Correct, yes, ma'am, I received it, and the stipulations that were made by Mr. Green regarding the states of service, I think that was the primary concern that we wanted to enter into evidence, which is why I said let's go ahead and stipulate that.
Yeah.
I'll bring it.
Mm-hmm. I haven't.
So the Department of Defense Military Prosecution Station, letter to Mr. Green dated September 30th, 2020, excuse me, to the exhibit number 6. Mr. Murphy, you'll see in that short.
Go to preliminary matters.
Part of the procedure, Mr. Green, I failed to mention is opening statement. Each client has the opportunity to present opening statements to the commission. They are not facts, they are not testimony. They are only to let the commission know what they hope the evidence will present today. Opening statements are required by either party, even attorney sometimes waive opening statements. Because the department has the burden of proof and organizing to receive it.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Members of the commission, good morning. We are here today regarding Patrick Michael Green, a former employee of the Knoxville Police Department. Mr. Green was with the department for only a couple of years, and as a patrol officer, one of his assigned duties while he was on patrol was to do the field interviews with parolees, probationers, and bed checks, as they're called. Mr. Green, unfortunately, for reasons unknown only to him, on at least 7 occasions, submitted false reports regarding these bed checks with these parolees. An investigation was done by the Knoxville Police Department, was able to establish this pattern, and it was a pattern, it was not a mistake or an accident. He was given at least 2 opportunities to, hey, is this report right? They printed about it at least twice and acknowledged, yes, it's fine, I did that. So again, not a mistake, not an accident. Once the investigation was done, Mr. Green was given the opportunity to stay with the department while that investigation was ongoing, and finally, through many levels of essentially making sure they got it right. The Knoxville Police Department spent a great deal of time to make sure that that Mr. Green was protected in a sense, that his rights were protected, that he was given every opportunity to appeal and to dispute what happened. Finally, on September 20th, that was over with for Mr. Green, and he's given his resignation for termination. Chief Thomas is here today, and she'll be able to explain to you and go through those multiple levels. And I think at the end of this hearing, you will have no doubt, unfortunately, that Mr. Green resigned for termination back in September of 2020.
Thank you, Mr. Green. Mr. Green, you would like to make your opening statement, you may, and if you is not required. Would you like to make your opening statement at this time?
Sure.
Step out that outline.
The state would call Sergeant Amanda Bunch, Darnell.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you?
I do.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
I'm Sergeant Amanda Bunch.
And where do you work, ma'am?
I work at the Knoxville Police Department and currently in the Internal Affairs Unit.
Okay, and I think I introduced you as Bunch Darnell, which I apologize for. I got that off of an email. So it's Sergeant Bunch.
Married name's Darnell, but I've been Bunch for so long at the department, it's easier to go by.
I understand. Okay, so you said you've been with the department how long?
Almost 15 years now.
Okay, and what division are you assigned to right now?
I'm currently in the Internal Affairs Unit.
And how long have you been with that unit?
I'm almost been there about 3.5 years.
Okay, and so back in 2019, a little over a year ago, you've been with the unit?
Yes, that's right.
And you know Mr. Green?
Yes, ma'am.
And how do you know Mr. Green?
He was an officer for us at the police department.
Prior to your involvement with him, with the investigations on him in IAU, had you ever interacted with him at all?
There was one prior investigation we had that I was just, I was new in the unit and I was kind of monitoring or kind of just watching how investigations were done. And he was part of that investigation as well. So that was my kind of first interaction with Officer Green.
Okay. Any discipline come out of that regarding Mr. Green?
I believe he had a secondary weapon he hadn't qualified with.
Okay.
I believe.
I'll get into that with Chief Thomas if necessary. But prior to this, you'd only had that one prior interaction with him.
I believe so.
Okay. And I say prior to this, so let's get into what we're here about today. when did you first become aware that there may be a problem involving Mr. Green and the field interviews?
Am I allowed to?
Yes, ma'am. So you're touching your file there. Did you write a report regarding this incident?
Yes, ma'am.
And the report was the result of how many months of investigation, would you say?
Oh, quite a few months.
Okay. And so, did you submit that to your superiors once the report was completed?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm going to show you a copy of what I think is that report. Is that the report that you submitted to your superiors there at the Knoxville Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
And at this time, I would ask that the IAU report, Sergeant Bunch, be the next exhibit.
You can speak up louder for the record.
Oh, no, you don't.
I'll just put that in so we can- You have a copy of it.
Are you yes, ma'am? And Sergeant Bunch, if you would review your report there and tell the commission members how you became involved with the investigation.
Yes, ma'am. On November 27th, 2019, our office received a memo, a department memo from Captain Powell. And in the memo, it was requesting our office look into the allegation that Officer Green had falsely submitted parole and SHOCAP checks on numerous occasions.
And if I can stop you there, what is a SHOCAP check?
It's the same thing as a parole check, but for a juvenile. I don't know exactly what, it's an acronym. It's basically a repeat offender for juveniles.
Thank you. Please continue.
That's how it was brought to my attention. Usually the memos come to the commander of the unit, the lieutenant over the unit, and then he assigns it to one of the investigators within our unit, and I was assigned this case.
Okay, so upon receiving the assignment to investigate these discrepancies, what did you do first?
So first, what I usually do, obviously, if it's involving false reports, what I did, I kind of do a preliminary investigation. And I knew they had done, based on the email or the memo, that they had kind of looked back about 6 weeks into Officer Green's reports that he had done for parolees and SHOCAPs. And so I went back even further. I believe I went back 6 months and only pulled reports regarding parolee and then SHOCAP checks, and they're called field interviews. Once I did that, then I figured out who I needed to interview to kind of get all the facts of the case prior to talking to Officer Green.
So in the course of doing that, pulling these reports and determining who you had to speak to, what kind of pool of interviewees did you end up with? How many people did you have to end up talking to?
Based on the memo and learning about the allegation, I knew that it had come through multiple supervisors. Officer Green had been working for overtime for some supervisors that initially kind of were made aware of this allegation from an officer, a street level officer. He had brought it to his supervisors, which in turn brought it to what we call the XO supervisor. He was a lieutenant kind of over the West District, because that is the area that Officer Green was assigned to. So basically, I interviewed everybody within this chain of evidence, I guess, that from the officer level all the way up to the XO plan that brought it to our attention.
And during the course of that part of the investigation, while you're conducting these interviews, is Mr. Green at any point made aware that this is going on, notified by you or someone else?
Not exactly by us right away. He did have a meeting prior to my start of the investigation with Lieutenant Rob Taylor, the XO of the West District, kind of asking him a little bit about the first inclination that there was an issue. But as far as I go, I like to typically kind of gather all the information. I've had to be part of investigations before, and I know that if you tell someone up front, then they just are nervous, and I might not be able to interview them for a month because we have to wait on all of our interviews to be transcribed so that we can provide it to them to review prior to us asking them questions. So I don't typically let the person know that that is kind of the focus of the investigation until I'm ready to interview them. But he did, I don't know if he was made aware by Lieutenant Taylor, wasn't part of the conversation that it was going to come to internal affairs, but he did have a chance to speak with Lieutenant Rob Taylor about these discrepancies.
And so how long did it take you from beginning, when you were assigned, until you felt like you were ready to interview Mr. Green?
So if we received it on November 27, 2019, I interviewed Officer Green on January 1st of 2020.
So I'm sorry, say that again.
November 27th of 19 to January 1st of 2020.
So a little over a month.
Right, and I need to backtrack just a second. Aside from just looking at the field interview reports, I also spent time reviewing all his dash cam footage to give him the benefit of the doubt if he submitted the report, let's just say at 11 p.m., I almost looked through his whole shift. He was on night shift from start to almost finish to make sure at no point did he ever go by the thing. So you can map it out where the officer had driven basically his whole shift based on our old camera system. So I also reviewed hours and hours of dash cam video to see if Officer Green had gone by these addresses on the times that I found that he hadn't gone by.
Okay, and so when you say that you had found that he hadn't gone by, do you mean to say you're matching up reports he submitted with where he said he was supposed to be versus where he actually was?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and did they correspond to each other? Okay, how many times did they not correspond to each other?
7 times.
And so if you could look in your report there and tell the commission members, what dates are we talking about? Is it all like within a week, or is it spread over a time period?
And there was 2 individuals that he, and just so the commission knows, at the start of roll call every day, supervisors assign tasks. And that is one task that a supervisor assigns officers to do. They kind of spread it out amongst the squad. So Officer Green didn't get these every night because these individuals weren't actually on what we call his beat. It wasn't in his designated area, but they kind of spread the wealth, I guess you would call it. But basically they, when he was assigned them, that's what he was required to do that night. But there was 2 addresses. One was a Crowley check and one was the SHOCAP check. And do you just want me to go over the dates?
For now, yes, ma'am.
Okay. At the one address, the dates that he failed to go by but submitted reports was, August 9th, 2019, September 21st, 2019, October 11th, 2019, and November 6th, 2019. These are the dates for the second address, the actual Crowley check that he did not respond but had submitted reports. First one was June 24th, 2019, October 23rd, 2019, and November 21st, 2019.
Okay, and so the second date, you said it was for a parolee that you
yes,
were checking on? And so, to be clear, we have 7 incidents, but they're between 2 specific addresses, is that
Yes.
correct? Okay. The first dates that you read off, was that for, excuse me, was that for a juvenile or probationer? Who
That was
for?
the juvenile, the first 4.
And then the last 3, that was for, it's a different address, but one particular parolee.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Sergeant Bunch, can you tell the commission members why that November 21st, 2019 date, field interview, got everyone's attention?
Yes, ma'am. So on November 21st, 2019, the officers on the previous shift, which would be afternoon shift, had found out that probationer had a active warrant for his arrest. So around 8 p.m., they had actually gone and picked up that individual and had taken him to jail. And that was around 8 p.m. And then Officer Green had submitted or the field interview for later on that night, maybe around 10:30. saying that he had checked this person and that he was home and accounted for. So the officer that actually had taken part, you want me to go into all of this?
Yes.
Okay. The officer that had taken part in the arrest of this probationer, he's very proactive in his area. He likes to look at the night before's kind of reports in his area to see any of the people in his area that might have gotten picked up, if he needs to work on something, et cetera. And he had seen that there was this field interview completed by Officer Green regarding the individual they had already, had just a few hours prior, put in jail. He checked the Knox County's inmate population, and that individual was still incarcerated at the time that Officer Green had completed this field interview. So he had taken that information to his supervisors, which in turn then took that to Lieutenant Rob Taylor. Lieutenant Rob Taylor, being the gentleman that he is, he also wanted to give the officer the benefit of the doubt. He too looked up to see if the individual was still incarcerated, and he was.
Now, Sergeant Bunch, in your report, there's something about a duplicate report number. Could you explain to the commission members what that is?
Yeah, so this was one of the instances. There was two of these instances, but this specific night, a duplicate report is when, as officers, we call dispatch, say, hey, I need a report number. They read it off to us. We use that report number that dispatch gives us and we put it in we use Watson reporting. We put that number in there to kind of generate our report. The system knows if that report number has been used before, and sometimes either an officer messes up and uses that exact report number, or dispatch gives a duplicate number by accident. Regardless, that night, this report was rejected by our Watson reporting system because another officer had already used that report number. So at that time, what we have to do is call dispatch, get another number, and then resubmit the report that we'd already done. So this was one instance where Officer Green had two chances to realize he hadn't gone by the address and actually completed the bed check. And then there was also one other instance that the system reported rejected his report for a duplicate number and had to get another number and resubmit it.
And that the second duplicate report, was it for that same parolee, or was it for the other?
I believe it was
Juvenile,
for
I guess
the
it was.
show cap. It was for the juvenile. And it was hours later from the initial report that it got rejected and resubmitted.
So you have, through your investigation, determined at least 7 instances where he filed these reports saying he had done these bed checks or field interviews. But through looking through these hours of tapes, we find that he actually had not done what he reported to do. How many interviews did you do before you talked to Mr. Green himself?
Let's see. I'm gonna count really quick. Five interviews prior to Officer Green's interview.
Okay. And so did you finally interview Mr. Green?
Yes, ma'am.
And when was that?
It was January 1st, 2020.
And can you tell the commission about your interview with then Officer Green?
I had informed him at that time, actually sent an email out ahead of time informing them of their rights and responsibilities and what my interview or my case is about. So when he came in, we kind of go over just basically how it's going to work. Most officers haven't been in internal affairs, so I kind of just give a rundown that, how everything's going to go. I give him an opportunity to read all statements that had allegations against him. And if he wanted, he could review any of his videos. And then we begin the interview.
Did Mr. Green ask to review any of the videos that were there for him?
I don't recall.
Okay. So you begin your interview, and what happens then?
So I asked him, I kind of go down the basics, like where you're assigned and all those things, but that, and like I mentioned, that his supervisors rotate who does these show cap and parolee checks, but that also he wanted to make note that through the course of our academy time and our field training program, that he didn't believe he had received any formal training on how to properly complete these field interview cards on parolees and show cap checks, because I had also, for the record, had found 13 times where on video it shows Officer Green going by the addresses, but never stopping, turning his mic on. He may have stopped briefly, but never activating our microphone. So I didn't know if he had spoken to anybody. So I also asked him about those times.
On the times that you can see where he went by and may have stopped, does he ever leave the vehicle?
I can't see that. He either parked right next to the address, or I don't remember ever seeing him walk in front of his car or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
So I had to go over with him the 13 times that I'd seen him go by. He informed me with those that it was his understanding that bed checks were just that we needed to make sure that people were home. So he had developed a rapport through a few times that he'd actually gone up and knocked on the door and spoken to people that, hey, when I come by, just wave at me and we'll call it good, and that he would go on. And so within his statement to me, 13 times that I'd actually seen him by the address, that is how he completed that field interview that night. And then I then asked him about the 7 times that I never once saw him anywhere near the address, like I said, through the course of reviewing the in-car camera. And he informed me that what he would do at the start of every shift, if he was assigned that parolee, while still at our police department main building, the safety building, he would start the report, basically enter all the information. And then at the time that he would go and do the actual check, the bed check, he would get their number or the report number from dispatch and then submit the report. So on, specifically the November 21st instance, which was the first one I'd asked him about, he had said he had started the report and in the building or in the parking lot like he normally does, and then en route to do the bed check, had gotten diverted off of that to go assist another officer for a call or something of that nature, and had but with the intention of going on after assisting the officer to complete the bed check. He advised that at some point he remembered seeing the report in the queue of his report still kind of in process, and at some point submitted the report without going to the house.
So he did admit to doing that on at least that one occasion, the November 21st occasion.
Right, and because that's the first one I talked about, since it was the initial thing that kind of brought it to us.
Right.
You want me to just?
Well, did you lead him through then each of the other 6 incidents?
Yes, ma'am.
And did he have a reason or an excuse for why those field interview reports got submitted?
Kind of used the same analogy that had started the report early and couldn't remember if he had gotten diverted off stuff, but that he just never went back by and submitted it.
So let me answer it this way. Is there any other kind of report that you found during your investigation of Mr. Green where he would start the report, get sidetracked, and then just submit it anyway? Or is it just these 7 instances regarding these field interviews with a parolee and a juvenile probationer?
That's all that I looked at. I didn't look at any other reports.
As a result of your, well, let me ask, stop that. Any other statements that Mr. Green made regarding why these reports were submitted the way they did, or why he did what he did and he submit these false reports?
Let me see. You see, I don't recall. I did ask though. We have a truthfulness policy at our department, and I had asked as part of my investigation, if you're going to tell dispatch, hey, I'm out on what we call a 1043, which is an investigation, basically hold me out on that, and then he cleared it come November, which for us means you've done a field interview. I had asked him if he was being dishonest to dispatch in doing that, knowing that he hadn't gone by the address, that he was never out there when he said he was out there on this 1043 investigation. And he replied yes in my interview. That he had been dishonest to dispatch.
So as a result of your investigation, you submitted the report that you've referenced today. If you could go to the third page regarding your findings, can you tell the commission what your findings were?
Yes, I had 4 different findings for Officer Green. The first one I had sustained was neglect of duty. Do you want me to read what our policy says on that, or?
I was gonna get into that with Chief Thomas, but if you wanna give a bit of a background here, that would be fine, yes, ma'am.
So our policy for the neglect of duty says improper performance of or failure to perform a required police duty will be deemed neglect of duty. That's kind of what it fits most, but it does go on to say employees shall not engage in any activities or personal business which could cause them to neglect or be inattentive to duty. So basically, my findings with that is that he submitted the probation field interviews on the dates I had previously mentioned, but failed to actually do the vet checks, the assigned task that he had been given that day. The second finding I had was sustained was submitting false reports. And those reads that reports submitted by employees shall be truthful and complete, and no employee shall knowingly enter or cause to be entered inaccurate, false, or improper information. And again, he submitted 7 field interview reports through our system, but failed to actually do these vet checks, which would make them false reports. The third finding that I had on him, and I sustained it, was truthfulness. Through his own admission, he was dishonest to dispatch those 7 times when he was conducting probation checks and clearing the call code November, which is FI, for field interview, without actually going to the call. And then the fourth finding I had was just in our patrol SOP. It outlines how our field interviews should be conducted. And in there, it reads that field interviews should be a face-to-face communication. And I sustain that as well, because in the 13 times that he actually went by the address, through his statement, he only waved at them, which is not really a face-to-face communication. That's why I sustained that allegation as well.
And Sergeant Bunch, once you've completed your report, what is the next step?
So when I complete my report, I obviously put it in this file with all the tabs, so it's easily, you can turn to it really easily, and then I submit it to my lieutenant for review. And then it kind of goes up the chain of command. It goes to the chief of police to make sure that she believes that my report is complete and true. And then for any types of allegations that are pretty severe that potentially could result in termination or suspension, it's typically our practice to then, after the chief thinks that our investigation was complete, to then submit it to our law department to review as well. Because anytime that there's an appeal, obviously they're going to have to represent the city. After the law department's done, they send it back. Excuse me, and then it goes through Officer Green's whole chain of command.
And I'm gonna hand you what I have labeled the disposition report. Can you tell me if you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
Every time we complete a case, we have what is a disposition sheet. And there it basically goes, you kind of write just the basis of the complaint, where it came from, who the employee was, the allegation, and then the disposition classification, which is anywhere from first degree sustained down to exonerated, and even policy failure and things like that.
And if I may make this the next exhibit to the hearing. And Sergeant Bunch, you just went through the degrees, but on this report, what is it marked?
It's, yes, I'm sorry.
Hold it out and you hand it out. And I provided Mr. Green a copy already. Okay, I'm sorry, sir.
Okay, for this case, I had marked first degree sustained because I sustained Officer Green on all allegations, that I had looked into.
And over on the right side there, on disposition classification, it says the allegation is supported by sufficient evidence to believe the incident occurred. Recommendation for appropriate disciplinary action is made, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And who makes that determination as to the appropriate disciplinary action?
The chief of police.
Okay, and if you will go to the second page. And is that your signature there at the top?
Yes, ma'am.
And you spent a moment just now describing all the levels of review that this disposition has to go through. And even though you're the first signature there on the page, are you actually the first person to look at and make the determination, or you got that? Does Chief Thomas look at this before you do, the disposition report?
No, I complete this report and then I sign it. And then my lieutenant signs it and then we'll go to the chief after that.
Okay, but Chief Thomas does review your report before any disposition report is made, is that correct?
No.
Okay, I got that backwards in the conversation then. Disregard that, but that is your signature, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And down at the bottom is Chief Thomas's signature, correct? Well, not all the way at the bottom.
Yes, the second.
The second, the department head. All right, thank you, ma'am. All right, I believe that's all I have for you, Sergeant Bunch. Mr. Green may have some questions.
And as I stated, this is not your time to give your side of the story, so you won't have an opportunity to present information, maybe contradictory information. If any questions you have, you may ask for this bunch now. If you have any questions, you step to the podium.
No question, just sign off.
I can make a question for your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bunch, for your testimony today. At any time during your investigation, did you find that Officer Green violated his, the stated laws of the state of Tennessee?
As far as what, I'm sorry?
Any law violation in your investigation, has he violated any state law during this investigation?
I didn't, so our unit doesn't do any criminal matter, so if I found that, I would have had to pass it on,
So-
but I didn't find.
So in your investigation, you've not seen any criminal matter that this former officer of Knoxville Police Department committed any violation of any statute of the state of Tennessee?
Not what I was looking at now.
Is it in your opinion that this officer is unfit to be a law enforcement officer in the state of Tennessee forever?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Just like I have, I have a question. You stated that at the times he was parked near the address, and you never saw him basically get out of the vehicle or get there by camera. Do you have how long he was at those?
It was very brief. When our cameras are in background mode, it looks fairly, but it's a little choppy. It had to have just been a minute or two, maybe not even that long, but did stop most times at each address for frequent.
I guess I've got one question. Do y'all make any submissions or have any consult with the Attorney General's office in Knox County for
Yeah, I think she's from like Sumner County or something like that.
be entered into the kind of Brady and Giglio list? I mean, kind of charges that are sustained for truth.
I'm not sure.
What's the question? No, the question's for her, so you're not.
I'm sorry,
If you don't know the answer, I don't know.
I don't know. I'm sorry.
Okay. That may be a little bit above your pay grade, but I'm just asking if there's any kind of truth in charges or anybody
Yeah,
who's
she's with
talk to with the Attorney General's office as far as any,
Okay.
for the testimony for him being able to testify in court because of his truth in charges is sustained by the department.
I don't know as far as that. I always just knew through our training that it would become a Brady issue if we had sustained a truthfulness on them.
Commission members, is it,
Margaret, just remember to introduce yourself. Commissioner Dunbar.
I can't read it from here.
Okay.
Any other questions before I come? Any reading of this report?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much for testifying. Yes, please.
Chief Thomas.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony about the able to consider the whole thing and conduct the truth
I do. Thank you. Chief Thomas, will you introduce yourself to the commission, please?
My name is Eve Thomas. I'm the chief of the Knoxville Police Department, at least until May 1st, when I plan to retire.
Congratulations. And how long have you been the chief there?
Since June 25th of 2018.
And how long have you been a police officer?
I came to the police department on January 25th of, 1993.
Okay. And so you've been in that department your entire career?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You heard Sergeant Butch's testimony regarding field interviews and parole checks, or parolee checks. Can you tell the commission what patrol officers are told about how they should go about doing those?
So they're told, they go through the training academy. Part of that training academy is they go over every written directive during the academy. So I know Sergeant Bunch referenced the patrol standard operating procedure and several other policies. They go over all of those policies in the training academy. In addition to that, we have various trainings at different times. In addition to in-service training that's required, we do a lot of roll call training. So those policies are gone over many, many times. So the understanding of how to do the job is gained through those policies and review those policies, but also during the field training officer program. They go through a program with I can't remember how many DORs, but it's about 18 weeks. Now that we're on 12-hour shifts, it's going to be almost 4 months or 5 months. So they're paired with a training officer for nearly 5 months after they complete the academy, and they go through various trainings. And I can't say that, and they're paired with 4 different field training officers. I can't say that they're given that specific instruction without having reviewed his file.
Okay. But Officer Green at this point had been an officer for almost 2 years, maybe a year and a half.
Yeah, 2 years.
So he had completed his field training part of his employment. You also heard Sergeant Bunch talk about the code of conduct for the Knoxville Police Department. Can you tell the commission how and when the officers, your patrol officers, any officer, is instructed on what that code of conduct entails?
Sure, that starts again in the same way. That's one of our policies in the academy, and then throughout our careers, especially as changes are made in policies, including code of conduct, which code of conduct we don't change very often. It's our basic ethics and integrity.
It's pretty rock solid, you would
Yes.
say. Okay. When did you first become aware that there was an issue regarding the parolee checks with Officer Green?
I kind of remember exactly when. I think it was when that the West District XO had decided to make sure that it became an internal affairs investigation. I don't remember the exact conversation or date or time, but it was in that same time period, because I'm made aware of all internal affairs investigations as they begin.
Okay, that was my next question. So if something rises to the level of needing an investigation by the IAU, you are notified. Okay. And so once you became aware of that investigation, was Mr. Green immediately put on leave, suspended? What happens while that investigation is going on?
He remained employed with pay, and I don't have the verification on exactly what date, but I believe he was assigned to our telesurgeon. He was not patrol.
Okay, but that wouldn't have taken place as soon as the investigation began, is it?
Somewhere around that time.
Okay.
And again, I don't have that date. No, I'm sorry. I should have done that.
That's okay. So Mr. Green remained employed with your department while the investigation was ongoing.
Yes.
Okay. And based on the dates provided in the disposition report, which it's been already entered into evidence as an exhibit, but if you could look at that and tell me if you've seen that before.
Yes.
Okay, and it looks like on page 1 there, it says that the date the investigation was concluded was January 23rd of 2020.
Yes, I see. Yes, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Once IAU completes their investigation, final report, we're signing off on it. What happens with it then?
So as soon as the investigator, whoever the investigator is, finishes that, they will turn it into the commanding officer, who in this case, and is still the case, is Lieutenant Steve Steele. He's the commanding officer of the Internal Affairs Unit. He will review it. If he needs any changes to be made, he will send it back to that investigator and discuss it with them. Following that, he will sign it, and then it's sent to my office for me to review. I will look through it and see if maybe some further investigation may need to be done, some other additional questions asked, or I will assign it, thinking it's complete, that I concur that investigation is complete. Going to go through the whole process.
And in particular with Mr. Green's
Yes.
situation, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so because this situation contained 3 Class A violations, those first 3 violations that Sergeant Lynch read off, Class A violation is egregious enough that it can result in termination or suspension. If those type violations, the next person to receive the file, there's only one copy of the file after I review it and feel like it's complete, is our person at the law department, Mr. Ron Mills, our lawyer. He will review the file then, because he will be asked to defend it if we do a suspension or a termination in this appeal. So we want to make sure that we have all our I's dotted and T's crossed. And I know there's some time here that I'd like to address that if I could.
Yes, ma'am, please do.
And I don't have, we do have a secretary in internal affairs who will tell how long each person had to file. But during COVID, our law department folks were working from home. So there may have been a delay in him being able to get the file, physically get the file, and then review it, get it back. So that can take some time. After he reviews it, and in each instance, it goes back, after someone reviews it, it goes back to the internal affairs unit, and the administrative person at unit will log who has it or where it's at. So we're always aware of where it's at. After that, it will go through that officer's chain of command, starting with their deputy chief and captain. And I believe it's not reviewed by the sergeants until after the case is complete. But every supervisor in that officer's chain of command does review this.
And so in Mr. Green's case, just like everyone else's, there were multiple levels of review regarding the severity of the offenses and the possible discipline that may result. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay. And who makes the ultimate decision regarding that discipline if necessary?
that is my responsibility.
And what do you take into consideration when you're making that sort of decision?
Well, what happens after everyone reviews the file, if I could digress just a moment, is that I will get together with the internal affairs investigator, the commander, Mr. Mills from our law department, the deputy chiefs, which I have 3, and that officer's commanding officer or captain will all meet in a room and we will discuss the file. At that point, that officer's commanding officer will make a recommendation based on what they have read in the file and what they know of that officer, what they're feeling, what they think should be the result, what discipline they think I should impose. And we'll go around the room and I'll listen to each person. Mr. Mills also will listen because he wants to make sure that whatever's recommended is defensible. I don't make a decision at that point. I will write down, it's been my practice to write down, just jot down a note as to what is recommended. I will take that into account, and then following that, what we will do is we will schedule what's called a pre-disciplinary hearing with the officer involved. We will give them a copy of the case summary, which is that very first part of the file, and at least 48 hours from the time they physically receive that memo with a date on it to review that. And they're allowed to bring one person to the disciplinary hearing with them. It can be anyone. It could be a lawyer, it could be a friend, it could be another officer. And they will come to the disciplinary hearing. And again, this didn't happen in this case, but because he resigned. But they have the option at that point to listen to the case summary again. I will read it. This is all recorded, a matter of record. And they have the option at that point to tell me what they think, or give me the reason that they think, whether they agree with the case and what they think their behavior was at this point. At that point, I will listen to that and generally impose what I think the proper discipline should be. I'll listen again if they think that discipline is too harsh or not. I've never heard anybody say not harsh enough. But listen again, and then the discipline is imposed. At that point, we also, if they sign off, we give them the paperwork to sign off, they get a copy of our civil service merit reward rules because they have an option to appeal that discipline. So that's how our process works. Now, we never got into that pre-disciplinary hearing because Mr. Green resigned.
Okay. And during these, this kind of war room review, I guess, of the investigation where you have these multiple levels of supervisors and commanders meeting with you, did you ever hear anything to, or learn anything about Mr. Green to negate or lessen the severity of the findings that Sergeant Bunch detailed in her report?
No, I think one thing, and that with the Knoxville Police Department, I think with every officer, truthfulness is paramount. That is, you lie, you die. I'm sure we've all heard that term. That once that finding is made, that is extremely hard to defend. I have never been able to defend that myself. Some other things that are Class A violations, maybe. I take that very seriously because we invest a lot of time and training in our officers, and we need, I'm short on officers. I need folks, and if I can retrain them, that is always what I want to do. But some things are not recoverable, and truthfulness, in my opinion, is not.
You heard Commissioner Dunbar's question earlier regarding if you do have a finding of untruthfulness of an officer, are there any steps that you have to take with your local prosecutor's office regarding that officer?
Right. I have never personally had to do that, but I would, because that can affect their future testimony. And I think I would be being unfair to my district attorney not to do that. I think that's probably an ethical issue that I would not want to violate.
And so directing you back to the disposition report that's also on the screen, Chief Thomas, after hearing from everyone involved in the situation and reading the report, did you sign off on that disposition report?
I actually signed off on that report prior to that.
Okay.
That was upon reading the file. I agreed with that statement of facts.
And that never changed throughout the course of it? Okay. You mentioned the pre-disciplinary hearing that officers are given an opportunity to attend and kind of state their case, but that did not happen in this case. Why did that not happen?
Mr. Green resigned prior to that.
Did he resign prior to being notified he could have a pre-disciplinary hearing, or was it he was notified and then he resigned, if you can
I
recall?
don't remember, I'm sorry. That I do not know.
And I'm going to hand you the document. If you could tell me if you recognize that. Chief Thomas, I've just handed you something which on the iPads is labeled resignation. Do you recognize that document?
I do. This is a resignation form for the city of Knoxville.
And is it Mr. Green's resignation form?
Yes.
And at this time, Your Honor, I'd ask that the everyone else exhibit.
No, Your Honor.
And Chief Thomas, if you'll, this is a standard form, obviously.
Yes, it is.
And the officer that was given an opportunity to state their reason for resigning, what did Mr. Green state was his reason?
It's written on here, personal reasons.
Did you speak with Mr. Green when he, on the date of his resignation or prior to his resignation?
I don't believe I did.
And what is the date of his resignation?
September 16th of 2020.
And is that your signature on the bottom, or did someone sign on it?
Actually, someone signed on my behalf on that. It was actually our personal director at the time, Brian Malone.
But you accepted Mr. Green's resignation?
I did.
And I'm going to. You can tell me if you recognize that document.
Yes, sir.
And what does that mean?
This is a decertification request that I had sent to have, Mr. Green's post-certification, taken away.
And if I could have that document, labeled D-cert request, entered as the next.
No, Your Honor.
October 1st, 2020.
Now, Chief Thomas, you just testified that you did not have a conversation with Mr. Green, personally regarding his resignation,
I
correct?
believe I did.
Okay. And can you tell me the date on this decertification request?
It's October 1st of 2020.
And the grounds being,
He resigned prior to a hearing where I would have terminated.
okay. So based on the findings of Sergeant Bunch's report and her investigation, and which you found no reason to dispute, and after reviewing everything concurred in, you were going to terminate him, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Can you tell the commission why you submitted the decertification request instead of just termination and letting Mr. Green, or resignation, and letting Mr. Green go on his way?
Well, and I believe Commissioner hit on this, is that our word is our bond, and I think that him having a finding under my command of truthfulness affects his future as a police officer, testify in anyone's court. I think that should he go to another department, I would hope that they would come and look at his internal affairs file to see this. But this is I feel like this is my duty to protect and uphold all officers, to do the right thing and tell the truth. This hit me home way back in 1999 when I realized when I went to court that unless I had a video with me, my word wasn't any good. I had to substantiate a DUI case by video what I was saying. And if we have somebody out there who is not being truthful, that just bolsters that need to have somebody else verify what an officer is saying. And I think that's horrendous. I don't like that. And I think it's my duty to make sure that the officers who are doing the right thing are not tarnished by someone who is not truthful in what they're doing. So.
That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Mr. Ewing, any questions?
I do have two questions. Ma'am, do you, oh, yes.
Chief, do you know the dates when we began the probation parole show cap program, when that began?
I do not, but I believe we did it even when I came on in 1993.
As far as I'm aware, it was not a part of anything until after I had completed it. And my second question is, are you aware that you're required to submit these certification requests within 10 days by post standards?
I probably am not. I can't say that I am.
No further questions.
Thank you.
Chairman Martin, Chief, I've been curious about the city of Knoxville's involvement in these. Are they state parole people that you're checking?
Our parolees, yes.
So they're on state?
Right, our
probation
juveniles are
parole.
through our juvenile court.
Right. Through juvenile court?
Yes,
These are juveniles, not adults.
it's a combination. These are both cases.
State and local
Yes, sir.
juvenile issues. Is there, I'm a rural sheriff in Middle Tennessee, so I'm not in the big city of Knoxville, and I don't understand a lot of things, but in the past, I hear a lot about these parole checks that your officers are having to do. And I know in a city your size, you get a lot of calls. And my neighbors to the north of me, Metro Nashville, when their officers come over to you, they're probably 20 calls behind when they go in service, and they're 20 calls behind when they go out of service. And the officers in these larger cities are having to do a lot and keep up a lot. But I'm really curious about this stuff of these parole checks that your department is doing, and how that came about. And is that a partnership with the state of Tennessee State Parole and Probation Board? And is there compensation that your city gets for your officers doing this? And I'd like to know how this came about and how this kind of works, because it really intrigues me that you're taking on, even though I know you're trying to keep the community safe by your officers keeping these bed checks with parolees and stuff, but it seems like the city taxpayers of Knoxville would like to see their officers out here, protecting and serving and answering the calls and whatnot instead of doing the state of Tennessee job of checking up on their parolees. And could you expand on that for me?
Sure, and we work in partnership with the state, and, you know, and especially with our juveniles, they have a curfew. And we want to make sure that they're in when they're supposed to be in, because they have shown a propensity to not be doing the right thing. And we want to, anything we can do to prevent a crime from happening, prevent somebody from being victimized, I think our taxpayers would appreciate that. That's what this is, it's preventative.
I appreciate that answer now. I totally understand. I just, I know as shorthanded as you are, and, probably the rest of us, law enforcement administrators here with officers and openings. I want to ask this question, Chief. Do you feel that this young man is totally unfit to be a law enforcement officer in any agency in the state of Tennessee?
I do. Truthfulness is huge to me. Every time I give a speech at a graduation, I talk about that. I talk about character, I talk about ethics, I talk about how that will be tested and it will be so easy. And I talk about how important, and once it's lost, it can never be regained. So I do believe that.
I'll one follow-up question and I'll shut up. But, Chief, based off this investigation of these parole and show cap checks, have you had your internal affairs or any other sub agency within your department do an internal audit to see how many other officers in your department are not doing these checks, and how many maybe possible field interviews have been done since this major investigation that you spent a lot of time on checking on field interview cards and contacts? Have you expanded on that?
I have not asked for an internal audit, but we did make it known at the very beginning of this investigation. And so I expect my supervisors, you know, when I have 384 right now, I'm not sure exactly how many officers I had at the time. Mr. Green did this, it was probably close to that. We've been a little bit short, but they have 2 sergeants and a lieutenant on the squad. At times that has varied, but they have supervision that will spot check their videos to make sure that they're doing what they're doing. We have a policy that says that they need to do that. And as this came out, we became aware that we need to be sure that this is done. Did I ask for an audit or an investigation? An audit or a specific command go down? No.
Chief Thomas, Commissioner Ryan. How many, if any, parole show cap checks was Mr. Green assigned, or do you know of any that he was assigned prior to the August 9th, 2019, or after that November 21st, 2019? You know if he assigned any before that or after that?
I do not. I can tell you that as a matter of practice, as Sergeant Budge testified, that the sergeants each shift will assign different tasks to officers to do during their shift. So I'm assuming he would have had some, but I cannot say certain.
Commissioner Wright, again, I have one quick question. Are you aware of any complaints, service from the public on Mr. Green during his time of service throughout the period?
I was just made aware of one this morning in a casual conversation with Sergeant Bunch. So that was the first one I was made aware of.
Commissioner Wagner, thank you, Chief Thomas, for these sex offender parolees?
I'm not sure what their violations were. We do have someone who checks our sex offenders, and that is his sole job, so I'm assuming probably not.
I'm saying, yeah, just one question. I'm curious, just based on what we've heard today, and I'm not a law enforcement officer, so I'm kind of looking at this from the outside, being lawyers. But when we look at this, I'm curious. It appears that the officers receive these assignments to do with show cap or that check at the beginning of the shift, and they'll go out and walk responsible time to time because that checks are outside their zone of responsibility. But if they get to the end of their shift and they simply ran out of time, they weren't able to make these bank shifts and other duties that they planned to occur, what is the consequence of them coming back and saying, hey, I'm sorry, I just wasn't able to get by and check on you?
Sure, and I'm sure that happens. But in these cases, this officer filled out a card saying he did that. If he had done that, had he not filled that out in the computer, I'd say a card because it used to be a pen and paper, I'm sorry. It's now all done on computer and computerized. He didn't have to do that. He would not have done that.
What happens if he says, I just want to do this? Is there a cost?
That's probably a conversation between him and his immediate supervisor, his sergeant, the next night when they look over what was done or what was not done. If there's not one in there for that sergeant to look at and sign off on, the sergeant also signs off on those field interviews. That's between them, and we understand that. I mean, I understand that. I've been a sergeant. I've gone through the ranks of the police department, lieutenant captain, all the way up, and I understand that there are times we can't get to those things. Much as we try, we can't, because that call for service is paramount.
By the way, sorry.
Commissioner questions for Mr. Thomas? All right, and you direct. No, thank you. Can you recall this is the list of questions?
No.
That's a stage group. Yeah.
I'm not commissioned to line it
Okay.
up. Oh, commission partner. You have none of it.
Yeah, he's on. I got him. Let's walk around. You're welcome. Oh, I know. Yeah, no, I already.
My listen, Commissioner, for sure, that's, he can listen, he can listen, but he can't vote. He can't ask the question. Just in case we get ready to vote, he tries to vote.
Okay, I can just keep him muted then, or I'll send him a message on here if he'll see it, or I can get Kathy to email him.
Even though it didn't seem much of that.
That's what I'm doing. Next year.
We'll always get right.
Oh, yeah, right. That was my phone. They said you either have to. No, it's not.
That was part of that.
Just had huge money there, and I think like $42 a year.
They got pretty warm already, so crack the door open, let's heat it. I brought that little table fan in the back of my truck in the event.
Look at that.
Commissioners, 10 minutes, feel free to seat, please.
One person.
He'll even say it. God, I'm shaking. Free phone.
All right, after a brief go back on the record to speak, let's Mr. Green, this is your opportunity that your commission. Would you like to testify in your own behalf?
I would.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth so help you?
Do.
Identify yourself for the record.
Patrick Green.
Since you understand, I should put it at the very beginning. I know that we talked about this earlier, but did you understand that you have the right time and attorney in this matter?
Yes, yes, Your Honor.
That was in my please do or respect to the team, because you were not represented by counsel, which is perfectly fine, and I hope you don't represent yourself, have anybody represent you, because you do not have counsel, your testimony will be in narrative form, or you must stick to the facts as presented in the charges and allegations. The commissioner, the commission, should be like this.
I won't take a lot of your time this second. Just have a few things. Regarding this certified mail that was sent to me, if you look at the date, it says October 19, 2021. I was on post at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. This was delivered to my parents' house, signed for by them, not by me. I received no notification that I was being certified. Of course, I was in basic training. We don't have access to phones. We got 1 5-minute phone call to call home. That was it. Everything else is taken away from us communications wise. I read to you the date that I shipped basic training. Like I said, it was 6 days prior to this. It was also outside of the 10-day window, according to the post website, that the agency has to submit a certification request. So after that 10 days had ended, as far as I knew, I was not being certified, and then I left shortly thereafter with no means of communication. I can only guess that my parents signed that certified mail, but it was not me. It'd be impossible for me. I was almost 1,000 miles away. Other than that, pretty disappointed in myself. I did those things. Those are my reports. Really not much else to say on it. I believe I can still protect people and help people. That's what I currently do. Just in a smaller form. That's all I have.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Green, I thought that we had emailed back and forth and that we clarified this. If you will look at the green card that you have there, That is specific to the hearing for today. So the date on that is October 19th of 2021. And that would be the date that we received it back in my office, not the date that you were served.
I thought that was the date it was sent to me. That was my mistake.
And so what I think you're referring to is a year ago,
Yes.
October. And so let's just clear that up. As we've already stipulated, and I think it's now on their iPads. And you didn't do this, but I'll let you use this for you. I'll wait for the other Ms. Cooper to come back. There we go. Mr. Green, are you referring to those dates, September 30th of 2020 through, I don't recall what the exact dates were. If you want to tell the commission again, when were you shipped out for training?
I had to be there on October 13th at 0600 hours.
Of 2020?
Correct.
Okay. And so, with your permission, and with Judge Padfield's permission, if we could make this document the next. Okay. Okay, thank you. So exhibit number 6 is your orders from last year regarding your training.
Correct.
Okay. And so, the green card certified mail situation, is that cleared up?
Yes,
Okay.
I apologize. I misunderstood that.
You didn't testify at length, obviously, but one of the things that you did say was that you own it. You own that you did not do the checks, like you should have.
Correct.
You own that you said that you did those checks even though you didn't do them. So you would agree with the finding that, you violated the code of conduct regarding truthfulness?
Yes. I would add this. The only way to clear a call is by saying the code. You can't. So when I was diverted to go help somebody to go answer a call, I would have to say, I have to clear it from the radio, or it will stay on the screen, and I can't get pertinent information to the next call that I'm going to.
Okay. Regarding these field interviews and these checks, however, would you agree with Chief Thomas's testimony that the service calls take priority over any field interview or parole check?
Correct.
Would you agree with Chief Thomas when she said that you didn't indeed have to submit these, what are essentially false reports? You could have talked to your supervisor instead and just said, I didn't get around to doing them, for whatever reason.
I was asked about that in the initial internal affairs investigation, and it should have been documented at some point. I was asked if there was a second investigator in that investigation. I don't know why they're not present.
Mr. Green, you had your opportunity to call your own witnesses. Did you call that other witness?
I don't know who they are. But who asked me about that and if there was pressure put on us to do these checks? And the answer is yes, we were told we would be written up or reprimanded to get anything done at times.
Would a reprimand or a verbal warning is certainly, though, not going to rise to the level of you violating the code of conduct regarding truthfulness? Would you agree with me on that?
Yes.
Okay. Regarding the restatement or declaration earlier, because it wasn't really a question, Chief Thomas, about when the requests for decertification are supposed to be filed, are you aware, and I'm sure you are, because we were both on the call, we had a motion to dismiss in front of Judge Padfield about a month ago regarding that issue, correct? Where you raised that issue and said, this whole thing should be dismissed because the request for decertification wasn't submitted within 10 days, correct?
Correct.
And that was dismissed, correct?
Correct.
So you would agree with me that that issue has been dealt with and we're past that now, right?
Well, I would like the commission to know that the procedure was not followed. Even though there's no written rule, or there is a written rule, but there's not a written consequence. It says shall, and as far as I remember being trained at TCA, when shall is written, it means it has to be done.
Okay.
And so just as far as holding everyone to the same standard of rules, I believe that they should have had to follow the same standard of rules. And there was a meeting in which I resigned. It's recorded. I met with the deputy chief and Chief Thomas and Ron Mills in her office. It's on record on this date, because I resigned immediately after. There should be the date on the 16th.
So you're, going to hand you the resignation, if that's what you have in front of you? Okay, thank you. And so you're saying that on that date, September 16th, 2020, you did indeed resign?
Correct.
Knowing that if you didn't resign, you could be terminated, correct? Okay. Mr. Green, would it surprise you to learn that that 10 days that you're talking about is in regards to change of status of an officer and not regarding when or how a certification request can be submitted.
Maybe I misread it, but I read it as if they're going to take my certification away, it would be a change in status that they have to submit it within 10 days of that meeting where I resigned, where I was going to be terminated.
But it surprised you to learn that status regarding an officer is in regards to whether or not they are still employed under your agency.
I don't quite follow you, but, because I resigned employment at that point.
Okay, Mr. Green, regarding the dates that you were shipped out with military, I say saying shipped out, I'm a Navy brat, you were training, correct? Okay. And so the dates that you described, you were not available for contact of any kind.
Correct.
Okay. When did you get back to home?
I was allowed to come home for a few days for Christmas and then sent back.
Until when?
The ending date should be,
I'll bring it back.
the ending date should be on there. So it would have been approximately 7 weeks from January 15th. I ended up graduating early March due to COVID with some delays.
Okay, so where it says January 15th of 2021, you're saying that actually ended up being
That's
after
that's my training report date to my advanced school, and then it's 7 weeks from that.
So whenever that is, so we'll say mid-March.
Correct.
Okay. You did have contact with the Post Commission after you got back from training though, correct?
Correct.
You did have an opportunity to appear before what we call the informal committee to present your case at that point, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, it was referred to the full commission for this hearing.
Correct.
Okay. So you did have an opportunity to, as I said, bring up your side of the case, address any questions that they may have had regarding conduct or contact or your ability to respond to these issues. You did have that opportunity.
Correct.
Okay. That's all I have.
And hand it over. This is, I just want to give a little bit clearer instruction. Obviously, all the law enforcement agencies have been, officers have been trained how to conduct investigations. Your investigation might be different, the questions that you might ask may be different. The questions here for this must be limited to the document that we accept into evidence, to Mr. Green's testimony himself, or in response to testimony from another witness.
Commissioner Forrester, you said that you were ordered to put those checks during the tour period, correct? You were ordered to put those checks into the record.
Oh, correct.
Right. Since you were ordered, why did you not do that at the end of your shift, even if it was over?
I never really considered that. These were generally done at the same time every single day, just because of calls for service. We were routinely 15, 20 calls a night, even on night shift. So we would go immediately after roll call to attempt to do these, unless it was something pressing.
This is Commissioner Cherry. Mr. Green, with these checks, how many of them were within you have an area where you're responsible to cover the geographical area. Were these calls outside of that area or within the same area?
I was responsible for beat 83, which is about 99% shopping malls and things like that. So I didn't have any within my actual beat. I had no responsibilities. I would go outside my beat, down towards Sutherland Avenue, which was the closest to where this one was. But I had none inside beat 83, unless it's been shifted since it was 5 months.
And I don't expect you to remember exactly what was going on every one of these times when these times in your life. But is it fair to say that you were busy answering other calls, doing other issues? That's why you
Absolutely. We were consistently busy. You know, everyone here knows that we're law enforcement as a whole is short-handed. We were also short-handed. That's not an excuse. That is inaccurate.
you have any knowledge of how other officers deal with these? I mean, is it difficult for officers to get into their shift? It's like, hey, I spend that time to do this, the target is checked, and they would actually make a check. Is that something that happens to your knowledge?
There was a practice of clearing what we call code Q, which is taking a call in service, which you get to it if you can. But those were usually used on smaller things like noise complaints or things we couldn't necessarily get to. But I didn't pry into other people's reports or anything like that.
I think you're well aware that as far as having a basis for certification, that's been pretty well established. Now we're kind of looking at mitigating circumstances and looking at whether or not you should be allowed to continue to keep officer in spite of this violation. With that in mind, how this commission basically what you've been doing, it's like you're running the Army, just so you had to train, like you continue in the Army, reserves or National Guard. What do you do?
Yes, sir. So I am attached to the 278 Armored Cavalry Division in Maryville, Tennessee, and as a National Guardsman. I am a public safety manager for large events now. So I go to large concert venues, like for example, with the tragedy in Houston. I specifically go to those places and try to avoid that. We do large crowd management, things like that. I'm not in an official law enforcement capacity anyway. I work private security, and that is the career that I'm currently on. With regards to my military career, I guess what I would ask the commission to consider is to allow my post to just expire, because this did cause me a speed bump already once. I've had to have additional interviews with the Department of Defense about my internal affairs investigation because they don't say anything. As far as me promoting and getting to higher levels of service, it's going to continue to be an issue. It's something I'm going to continue to have to deal with because I did it. So I would just, again, I'm not in any official law enforcement capacity right now, and I don't have any plans to continue in that. I'm pursuing this private.
What's your name?
I'm not married.
And thank you for your volunteer service.
Mr. Green stated that on your resignation in September of 2020, correct?
Correct.
You went into the military and went back to the city in October.
That was my ship out date, so I enlisted April 3rd.
Was your intention during the investigation, had you already done something with the military or signing up with them?
Like I said, my enlistment date was April 3rd. I had actually attempted on 2 prior occasions to enlist, but I was medically denied, and I had to get a letter actually from the city of Knoxville, a fit for duty letter that I submitted to get in because I've had 2 reconstructed knee surgeries.
Was the police department, were they aware of you going?
Oh yes, I had to submit my drill schedule to the supervisor of the Telter unit, so they knew what weekends I would not be there because we had pre-training drill where they would train us before we left. I believe I participated in 5 events.
Mr. Green, do those questions promptly on that new testimony that you were commissioners to do?
No, Your Honor.
Can you tell us if there's any questions? No. If Mr. Green, you speak to the bank, you have any other ones?
No.
Aside from the document you've already have to consider number 6, or the any other document you wish to submit to the commissioner to consider? So you rest.
I do.
No.
Yes, ma'am.
Ready?
Members of the commission, you heard today that service calls are paramount, obviously, for a patrol officer. That's why they're out there to not only respond to criminal activity, but as Chief Thomas said, to hopefully prevent criminal activity if they can. Part of that was to do these checks. That was part of the responsibilities and duties as an officer with the Knoxville Police Department, regardless of your feelings on the usefulness of those or if they should be discontinued because service calls are the officers are already overwhelmed. That was what he was supposed to do. It struck me when Chief Thomas said, he didn't have to do that. He didn't have to submit these reports. He didn't have to lie to us. Not just once, not just twice, but 7 times. He could have had a conversation with his supervisor. He could have, as Mr. Forrester, Commissioner Forrester pointed out, there were other people who worked late. Did you think about that? No. Did you ever attempt to address this feeling that you had too much to do and not enough time to do it? Apparently not. You just lied about it. There is a reason that being truthful in your daily life as a police officer is paramount, and why violating that truthfulness is a grade A severity type of violation that can result in your termination. This officer, because of these findings, which he does not dispute, by the way, I own it. He admits that he lied repeatedly. This officer, if he ever wanted to be a police officer again, is of no use in a court of law. He can't prosecute a crime because the first thing that's going to happen as a defense attorney, if I were that defense attorney, is get up there and say, let's talk about this report, this finding. Again, that you do not dispute that you're a liar. And what's really struck me about all of this, Mr. Green, is that he lied about something that is easily verifiable. All that Sergeant Bunch had to do was sit down and go through the reports and go through the videos. He was eventually going to be found out, whether he wanted to be or not, whether he was caught or not, sooner or later, because this is just so basic. He was going to get caught, and yet he did it anyway. Mr. Defense Counsel, as you're questioning Mr. Green, one of my questions would be, if you're going to lie about something like that, what else are you lying about? The question has been asked, should he ever be a police officer in the state of Tennessee again? Chief Thomas, very clearly, no. No. We can't trust the police officer to tell the basic truth about what he's doing on his daily routes. How can we trust him to do anything else? He should not be a police officer again. His certification should be revoked. I wish him well. We all do in his other career. If he violated the city of Knoxville's trust, he's violated your trust and what you issued to him and said, go forth and do well and be honest. And so the certification should be revoked. Thank you.
No further comment.
So the commission has heard the truth and now it's able to disagree. It's now my duty to charge you as to the law and must follow the decision. You are the exclusive judges of the facts in this case. You are also the exclusive judges of the law, specifically the statute, rules, and regulations, and their applicability in this case. You follow the law and the facts in this case and the direction from my charge. You exclusively have the authority to make findings of facts and reach conclusions of law in this matter. No one else can participate in these deliberations. However, if you find that you have the law or the terminology comes to, I can assist you. The state would like to respond to violate certain of the state's applicable statutes and rules. It is the state's burden to do those allegations of evidence. Do not complete the standard that requires a hearing without case proceedings. Preponderance of the evidence means the greater weight of the evidence, that there is sufficient proven information to cause you to believe that the state's allegations provide a more probable conclusion based on all of the evidence You must not infer from any of my rulings or instructions that I hold any view or opinion for or against any party. None of my remarks have been intended to indicate an opinion as to the facts or what the decision will be. The evidence consists of the testimony given by the witnesses during the hearing and the exhibits introduced to the evidence, which you may review during this deliberation if you choose to do so. The statements made by counsel for open statements and closing arguments are not facts. You are the exclusive determination of the credibility of any witness. You may find that all parts will be done and the testimony provided by any witness is credible. It's also your job to determine what weight is to be based on the testimony provided. So we'll have to see all witnesses that were sworn to oath or testify to the truth. There's an obligation to find the facts, determine the discrepancies. Although you may only consider the competent evidence presented during this hearing, this does not mean you are required to decide your own knowledge or expertise in this field. You may and in fact should weigh the evidence in light of your own training and observations. Ms. Cooper, do you want a potential finding of fact?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so Mr. Cooper, you're handing out a document. This document will be used solely in your deliberations. Help you in your deliberations. You may use it, you may disregard it, and you may take it with that. Mr. Green, do you have any proposed findings of fact that you can walk through this?
Okay.
This is the report for Chapter 2, the Census State reference for the members and health first everyone. From there, to the great decision and for the recent board. Unless there are questions from the commission concerning my charge, I will now turn the hearing over to the commission chair to preside over the deliberations, after which you will have findings of fact, the conclusions of law, including decision regarding whether any disciplinary action can be taken, and if so, some of what disciplinary action can be taken, and your policy decision.
Thank you.
And the commission members have a little bit of time to go over what's been submitted, that's also, we're all the sure.
Give everybody a little while, a few minutes to soak this in and go over what was handed to you. If everybody's had time, Mr. Secretary, do you have the board on this open book discussion?
Chair, just remember, usually you do the motion finding, like, this usually guide, if you like, some form of. This is really that the motion to finding the fact, to prove the law, taking the decision, these should be separate motion. And then all of the statement, be about the motion.
I'll make a motion, yeah, finding.
Have a motion on the, to accept the proposed final order. Do I hear a second?
Mr. Wright, second.
Have a second.
And is that, sorry, clarify, that the all numbers 1 through 6?
No, it's just, yeah, finding.
Is this part of the fact, 1 through 6?
Didn't say we had a second motion.
Yes, you did, and I would make sure it's all 1 through 6, that you're accepting all of it.
Correct, all six.
Motion 1 through 6, is that from Commissioner Ryder, you still correct, second? Any discussion? If not, call for the vote. We need to do a roll call.
No.
All in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries.
I'll also go ahead and make a motion to accept, 2023 as written with the conclusion of the law.
Make a motion to accept 1 through 3.
Mr. Wright, second.
Mr. Watt, second. Any discussion?
I suppose, I'll bring this up. Number 3, this is a petition to leave the respond on underlying conflict of the citizens and public law enforcement. This system warrant revocation of response as a law enforcement officer. So I don't think we can have some discussion about that, but every time we start with this whole, and I can know that this there's a basis for revocation and certification. That's the big question. Is it severe enough to want to do certain kinds of things? I'm hesitant to vote for that without at least more consideration. That's discussion. So that's not one.
Some other commissioners have any advices or concerns and what Mr. Jerry has discussed on number 3, Mr. Green's revocation.
Mr. Ryan, I believe that all of us probably have some feeling of harshness to this, to the fact that, when the truthfulness being as it does, I all have questions of the not for policies of doing these, but as the judge kind of reminded us, we have to go off the evidence that was presented to us, strictly based off of that. And based on that,
I'm sure you can. I hate to draw my defense counsel back to that. You have one here, I almost feel obvious. He's throw a couple lines in. I don't think there's any question that we would be justified to vote for certification. Kind of a person we have situations, numerous situations, that we've seen students, and then serve law enforcement. In this case, I don't think there's any person who has any aspiration to continue in law enforcement. To avoid perhaps stigma that's associated with activity in other areas. So I guess it is a random motive. Do we want to extend mercy? And balance that against justice. What's this violation of law? violation of policy. It was working. Not to go too far, but we basically heard the news about one week ago. On January 6th, characters that we have progress local one. The crazy situation is found guilty of pled guilty to a impediment of government proceeding in the sense to 41 months. One suggests that the damage the question comes to mind is 41 months severe sentence for 1 year. And you can take that away. That's God. But then we come to this situation. Black market has been very long on this transaction. What you get here in these circumstances probably you get to check the box. You aren't certified. And honestly, I'm kind of caught in the middle here a little bit myself because, yeah, why is a big deal, especially for a police officer? We don't like people going not crews. At the same time, you see a situation where I was in a reprimand or trouble. I understand how before some of the authority use your force to check the box and nobody's worried about it. So that you didn't make the right choice. I don't think any of this would argue that you didn't make the right choice, but again, this is worthy of it. Honestly, I'm not sure one. But not to mention so perhaps some of you who are in law enforcement, perhaps or presided proceedings where you're considering on your office. It's more like she's a little chief said, she's the admin. This is what we're doing. I would respect her for years of service. So, that's Dr. Hammer on this office. So perhaps you can point out.
This is a really important, since I'm a village and so personally, I would not trust you on a part of just to show that part is on both for us and possible
Commissioner Dunbar, let me just say, I've seen this several times through this very office, or still sheriff's office, and the times we had truthfulness issues. And, he said we ever presented them to the post, with certification, but we did take a hard look at the offer. And that's the reason I asked a question earlier about, presenting to the Attorney General for the information on the offer is truthful, because we all know, and it comes to allude to, is we all know that once you have a truthfulness issue, that your law enforcement career is pretty much over. And it's a, like I said, Mr. Cherry, you know, you kind of have between a place where you're not sure. You know, I just presented, you know, the truthfulness issue is a major deal. And like what he said, you know, at some point in time, they'll lie once, they're probably gonna lie again. Whether it's a small lie or a big lie, and I've even seen some people that were radio video that one of the officers lied about whether he had a doctor's note to have a beard. He changed the note. He was approved for the next 6 months. He went in and changed the date on it. Why, it's a very small, minute thing to the problem of truthfulness issue, and his career in law enforcement was over. I say all this, you know, it's a hard decision. That's what we're here for.
Not to piggyback on what you said, there's a difference in how I line. And, they're different between the long time on the document. And having had multiple documents.
Any further discussion?
Chair, for the motion is regarding the finding of fact. So, I'm sorry, let's read it, kind of say, conclusion of the wall, what is the wall in this area? That leaves 1 through 3 recited. And then number 1 is prepared and walls, the down number 2, including on the policy statement, once your decision is made, a judgment is made. They're not making the judgment to play right now and stop the wall.
Mr. Cherry has brought up paragraph number 3. We had discussion on that. I think we have a motion and a second.
Based on, statements tonight, not on my motion, but, the approval to, strike 2 and 3, to take the policy statement, and then step number 1 is the inclusion of the law. That's what you're saying.
I think it can be seen that way, it's up to your decision, but I mean, the second would be all that as well. Because the voting motion.
Any further discussion? Are you going back to your original motion?
I don't know what it says, this motion, which is striking 2 and 3, including one of that. Initial movement of policy statement.
That would be the last thing you do, the next thing would be the judgment, the decision.
Any discussion on the modification of the original motion? If not, all in favor? Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. On to the judgment.
Commissioner Wright, based upon the findings of the fact and the conclusion of the law, I'll make a motion that the requirement certification be revoked. Second.
There's a motion and second, any discussion on the revocation? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion carries. Any other?
You need to adopt the policy statement. For the action, for the interpretation.
I'll make a motion to adopt 2 and 3 agreements, and then including the law, policy statement.
Have a motion on the floor. And second.
Mr. Wright,
Mr. Wright, second. Discussion. Hearing none. All in favor? Opposed? None. Motion carried.
This is the code final order. Delivering the actual order. There aren't many, there are some.
There are some, and I've been editing as the discussion has been going on. I'll see if,
You want to print it out?
yes, please. Or is it you can print it out?
Well, we can, share today. Is that right?
I believe so.
members, I think, if we're done with this hearing, I think we have to return here, 2 o'clock.